I need to start with my daughter because everything in this story, every decision I made, every line I held, every moment I chose not to look away from what was happening came back to her, came back to the image of her face at that dinner table, came back to what I saw in her eyes in the 3 seconds between when those words landed and when she understood what they meant. Her name is Lily. She was 7 years old. She had worn her favorite dress, the navy one with the small white flowers that she had picked out herself from a shop in town and that she saved for special occasions because at 7 years old she already understood the concept of a thing being worth saving. She had brushed her own hair. She had asked me twice in the car on the way there whether she looked nice, and I had told her twice that she looked absolutely beautiful, which was true, and she had settled into her seat with the particular, quiet satisfaction of a child who feels ready for something important. She was ready. She had been ready for weeks. She had been told this dinner was for her, partly a chance to meet James's family properly, to sit at the table as part of something that was becoming real, to be included in the beginning of a life that would include her. And then Sandra looked across the table at my 7 year old daughter in her navy dress with the white flowers, and she said, in front of 11 people, in a voice that carried to every corner of that dining room without her having to raise it at all, "Oh, sweetheart, this dinner is really just for our family. The children here are James's nieces and nephews. You understand, don't you?" And Lily looked at me. That look. I will carry that look for the rest of my life. Stay with me. Because what happened after that dinner is the part this story is really about. My name is Claire. I am 38 years old. I live in the north of England, and I have been, for the past 2.5 years, engaged to a man named James. James is 41. He is kind and patient and genuinely funny, and the kind of person who remembers the small things. The name of your colleague you mentioned once 6 months ago, the appointment you were nervous about, the particular way you like your coffee when you're tired versus when you're not tired, because apparently those are different, and he noticed. He is, in every way I have been able to assess over 3 years of being with him, a good man. His mother, Sandra, is 63 years old. She is a retired school administrator. She lives 20 minutes away from James in a house she has occupied alone since James's father left 12 years ago, which is a fact I mention not as judgment, but as context. Because Sandra's relationship with James, in the years since his father's departure, had become something that bore examining, something that had moved from close to fused in a way that James, who is kind and patient and generous in his assessments of people he loves, had not fully seen, or had seen and found ways not to look at directly, which is a different thing. I have a daughter, Lily. Her father, my ex-husband, Tommy, and I separated when Lily was 2. It was not dramatic, our ending. It was the slow, sad unwinding of two people who had been good at being young together and discovered they were not as well matched at being adult. Tom is present in Lily's life. He is a good father in the particular way that some fathers are good in defined portions, consistent within his allocated time, loving within it, and then return to his own life in a way that leaves the daily weight of raising a child almost entirely with me. That is not a complaint. It is simply the shape of things. Lily has grown up knowing she has a father who is sometimes there and a mother who is always there. She is, as a result, very good at reading rooms, very good at sensing the temperature of a situation, very good at knowing, in the particular way that children who have had to develop early emotional intelligence know when something is wrong before anyone has said that anything is wrong. She knew at that dinner table before I did, because she was watching Sandra and I was watching James. James and I met through mutual friends at a birthday dinner 3 years ago. He knew about Lily from the beginning. I told him on our second date, clearly and without apology, that I came as a package, that Lily was the central fact of my life, and that any relationship with me would require a genuine and ongoing relationship with her. He said he understood. He said it in the way that some people say things they think they mean but have not yet tested against reality. He was tested, and he passed. Consistently, over months, and then over a year, and then over 2 years. He showed up. He learned what she liked. He sat through approximately 400 viewings of the same animated films because, Lily went through a phase and he thought the phase was endearing rather than exhausting. He came to her school play. He helped with homework in a subject he was bad at and was honest with her about being bad at it, which she found hilarious and which made her trust him more than any pretended competence would have. When he proposed 18 months ago, Lily was the second person he asked. He sat down with her, just the two of them, while I was in the other room pretending not to be watching through the gap in the door. And he told her that he loved her mom and wanted to marry her, and he wanted to know if she thought that would be all right. She had thought about it for a moment with the seriousness of a 7-year-old who understands that some questions deserve real consideration. And then she had said yes, and then she had asked if that meant she could call him dad. And James had said that was entirely up to her and there was no rush. And Lily had nodded and said she would think about it. I'd cried in the kitchen with my hand over my mouth so they wouldn't hear. So we were engaged. We were building something. The wedding was planned for the following spring. Lily was going to be flower girl. She had opinions about the flowers. She had, in the way of 7-year-olds who are paying attention, begun the very tentative process of expanding her understanding of family to include James's side of it. And then there was Sandra. I had met Sandra 4 times before the dinner. 4 separate occasions over a year and a half, which in retrospect told me something. That the meetings had been managed and spaced in a way that limited exposure rather than built relationship. James had always had a reason for the timing. Work schedules, Sandra's commitments, the organic difficulty of arranging things. I had accepted these reasons because I had no particular cause not to. My impressions of Sandra across those 4 meetings were mixed in a way I had been trying to resolve charitably. She was intelligent, clearly, sharply intelligent, with the particular organizational quality of someone who has spent a career managing people and systems. She was interested in James with an attentiveness that was striking in its completeness. She tracked him across a room. She noted what he ate and drank. She brought up references from conversations they had apparently had weeks or months before with total accuracy. She was warm to me in a way that I had described to Stephanie, my closest friend, as technically warm. Like warmth that was being performed rather than felt. Like someone who had decided warmth was the appropriate register and was executing it precisely. Stephanie had said, trust that instinct. I had said, she's going to be my mother-in-law. I want to give her a chance. Stephanie had said, you can give her a chance and still trust the instinct. I had not yet learned how right she was. What I had noticed across all 4 meetings was that Lily was not addressed directly by Sandra, not once. Sandra spoke about Lily, commented on how tall she was getting, said she seemed like a sweet child, but never to her. Never the direct engagement of one person acknowledging another person as real and present and worth speaking to. Lily had noticed. She had said nothing, being 7 and knowing instinctively that some observations are not for adults, but she had noticed. I had seen her notice. James had not noticed. James, who noticed everything, had not noticed this. I had not pointed it out because I was still, at that point, in the business of giving chances and making charitable assessments, and because pointing it out would have required James to look at something about his mother that I was not sure he was ready to look at. The dinner was Sandra's idea. A family gathering, James's 2 brothers, their wives, their children, Sandra, James, and us. 11 people around a table in Sandra's house. An introduction, an inclusion, a welcome to the family. That is how it was described. We arrived at 6. Sandra's house was the kind of house that announces its owner's standards before you cross the threshold. Very clean, very ordered, everything in a place that has been chosen and maintained. The kind of house where you become aware of your own potential to disturb things simply by existing in it. James's brothers, Mark and Peter, were already there with their families. They were pleasant. The easy, uncomplicated pleasantness of men who have not been asked to think too hard about this evening. Their wives were pleasant. The children, 5 of them, ranging from 5 to 12, were in the sitting room making the noise that groups of children make, and Lily had been brought into this group and seemed, from what I could see, to be holding her own. Sandra was in the kitchen when we arrived. She came out to greet us, kissed James, said something to me about my hair that was structured as a compliment and landed as something more ambiguous, and then looked past me at Lily. She said, "Hello, Lily. Aren't you getting big?" Lily said, "Hello." Sandra said, "Go and play with the others," and had turned back to the kitchen before Lily could respond. James squeezed my hand. I squeezed back. We were communicating in the shorthand of people who have been together long enough to have a private language, and what I was communicating was, I noticed, and I am being patient. And let's see. The first hour was fine. The sitting room had the noise and warmth of a family group that knows itself well. The food smelled good from the kitchen. James was relaxed in the way he is only at home, shoulders lower, laugh more frequent, and I found myself relaxing into it too. Found myself thinking that perhaps the instinct had been wrong, that the technically warm Sandra was simply reserved and would become more real over time. Dinner was called at 7. We moved to the dining room. Sandra had a long table, beautifully laid, and she directed people to their seats with the efficiency of someone who had thought about the arrangement. James and I were placed in the middle of one side. Lily was placed at the end, next to one of the children she had been playing with. The food came. Sandra had cooked everything herself. A large roast, the kind that signals occasion, that signals this evening matters. The serving dishes went around the table. Wine was poured, bread was passed. The noise of a family at dinner filled the room. And then Sandra looked down the table. She looked at Lily. Lily was reaching for the bread that was being passed around the table, the bread that was on the table in front of everyone. And Sandra looked at my daughter and she said it. She said, "Oh, sweetheart, this dinner is really just for our family. The children here are James's nieces and nephews. You understand, don't you?" The table went quiet. Not all at once. Duh. It rippled, the way quiet moves through a group when something has been said that no one quite knows how to respond to. Some people looked at Sandra. Some people looked at Lily. Some people looked at their plates. James went absolutely still next to me. Lily looked at me. That look. I said I would come back to it, and I am. She was not crying. She was not about to cry. She was doing something far more heartbreaking than crying. She was checking. She was looking at me to understand what had just happened, to find out from my face whether this was what she thought it was, to see whether the adult in her life who was always there would tell her how to make sense of this. Her face was very calm and very open and completely heartbreakingly uncertain. I said with a steadiness that I am still not sure how I produced, "You're fine, sweetheart. Keep passing the bread." And then I looked at Sandra. Sandra was already looking elsewhere. She had said the thing and returned to her conversation with the person to her right with the ease of someone who has done something they consider unremarkable. The table was beginning to recover. Conversations restarting, the noise of cutlery, someone asking someone else something about something completely different. James's hand found mine under the table. His grip was tight. He was telling me he had heard it, that he knew that we would talk. I kept his hand in mine and I looked at Lily and I made sure she could see my face. And I kept my face completely steady. And I made sure she could read in it everything she needed to know. You are fine. You are safe. We are going home in a little while. And I am going to handle this. Lily picked up her fork. She ate her dinner. She was 7 years old, and she had more dignity at that table than anyone else in the room. We left at 8:30. James made an excuse. Something about Lily's bedtime, which was real, but not the reason. Sandra said goodbye at the door in the technically warm way. She kissed James. She looked at me. She looked at Lily and said, "Lovely to have you," in the voice of someone saying a line. And Lily said, "Thank you for dinner," in the voice of a child who has been taught that politeness is not the same as agreement. In the car on the way home, Lily looked out of the window for a long time. Then she said, "She doesn't like me, does she?" It was not a question. I said, "Some people take longer to get to know. That's not about you." Lily looked at me in the rearview mirror and said, "Okay," in the specific tone of a 7-year-old who is accepting an answer she has decided is not the whole truth but is going to be decent about it. I kept my eyes on the road. James came over after he had driven separately. He sat down at my kitchen table and he looked like a man who has had a realization he has been delaying and can no longer delay. He said, "I am so sorry." I said, "I know you are." He said, She had no right. I said, James, I need to know what you're going to do, not how sorry you are. What you're going to do. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, I'm going to speak to her. I said, what are you going to say? He said that what she did was wrong, that Lily is going to be my family, that if she cannot treat her as family, she will see less of me, both of us. I said, is that what you actually believe, or is that what you think I need to hear? He said, it's what I believe. I just, I've never said it to her before in that way. I said, I know, that's the problem. He understood what I meant. He had spent 41 years navigating Sandra without confronting Sandra, the way children of difficult parents often do, finding roots around the obstacle rather than addressing the obstacle. It had worked after a fashion because the obstacle had never before placed itself directly in the path of something James could not root around. He could not root around Lily. I said, I need you to talk to her before this week is out, and I need to know what she says. And then you and I need to decide together whether we are still having the wedding in April. He went very still. He said, you're not calling it off. I said, I'm not calling anything off tonight, but I am telling you that I will not marry into a family that makes my daughter feel like she doesn't belong at the table, literally or otherwise. And I need to know whether you can fix that, whether you are willing to fix that, because if Sandra does not change, and if you don't require her to change, we are going to be having a very different conversation. James went home. I went and looked in on Lily, who was asleep in her navy dress because she had been too tired to change, and I had decided the dress could wait until morning. I sat on the edge of her bed for a while in the dark. She had her hand curled under her cheek the way she always slept. She looked exactly like herself, like the girl who had asked twice in the car whether she looked nice and had been satisfied by the answer, like the girl who had worn her best dress for an occasion that had not deserved it. I sat there for a long time. James spoke to Sandra 3 days later. He told me about it that evening, sitting at the same kitchen table, and he told me in full what he had said, what she had said, where it had gone. He had said, Mum, what you said to Lily at dinner was wrong and it hurt her and it needs to never happen again. Sandra had said, I was simply being honest about the nature of the occasion. Lily is not part of this family yet. James had said, she is part of my family. She has been for 2 years. When I marry Claire, she will be my daughter in every way that matters. Sandra had said, she has a father. James had said, she does. And she will also have me. And you will treat her accordingly, or you will not be present in our lives in the way you have been. Sandra had said, you're choosing them over your own mother. James had said, I'm choosing my family. You are part of my family. They are part of my family. That is not a choice between two things. But if you make it one, you should know which way I will go. She had not responded to that. She had cried. She had said he was breaking her heart. He had told her he loved her and that his position was not going to change. He had come to me and told me all of it. I said, how do you feel? He said, like I should have done it sooner. Like I've been managing her instead of being honest with her, and she got so used to being managed that the honesty felt like an attack. I said, it might take her a long time. He said, I know, but it starts now. Sandra did not come to the wedding. She was invited. James wrote her invitation himself, with a personal note attached that said clearly and with love that he hoped she would be there and that the door was open and that all she needed to do was walk through it. She did not walk through it. She sent a card. The card said she wished us well and that she hoped we would be happy. It was signed with her name, no kisses. I put it on the mantel for a week and then put it in a drawer. Our wedding was in April as planned. Small, 40 people. A venue on the edge of the moors. Clear spring weather that felt like a gift. Lily was flower girl in a dress she had chosen entirely herself, which was pink and had more layers than were strictly structurally necessary, and which she wore with complete conviction. She walked down the aisle ahead of me holding a basket of flowers, and she took it more seriously than anyone, and she did not drop a single petal in a place she didn't intend. When James and I exchanged our vows, I watched Lily watching us from the front row. She had her hands folded in her lap. Her face was the face she had worn in the car, asking whether she looked nice. That particular quality of readiness, of being prepared for something important. And then James said something in his vows that he had not shared with me beforehand, that he had kept for the moment. And what he said was, "And to Lily, I promise to always make sure there is a place at the table for you, in every room, for the rest of your life." Lily looked at me, not the uncertain look from the dining room, a different look entirely. She gave me the smallest nod, like a person confirming that something has been correctly understood. Sandra and James are in contact now, Mara. It has been 14 months, and something has shifted, slowly, in the way things shift when someone has genuinely heard something difficult and is working on it rather than waiting for it to go away. She came for Sunday lunch in February. She sat across the table from Lily, and she asked her directly what she was reading at school. Lily told her. Sandra listened. It is not warmth yet. It may become warmth. I am not going to require it to arrive on a schedule. What I am going to require, what I have required and will continue to require, is that my daughter is never again made to feel that she is a guest at a table that is hers by right. That the family she is being asked to join will actually join her back. That the people around her understand, clearly and without ambiguity, that she comes with me, that I come with her, that we are not separate questions, we are one answer. I want to say something to every person watching this who has a child, biological, adopted, step, fostered, or otherwise loved into existence, and who has had to watch that child encounter the particular cruelty of being made to feel like less. You will want to stay calm. You will want to be fair. You will want to give people chances and assume the best and not make it bigger than it has to be. Do all of those things. They are not wrong, but do not, in the process of being fair to everyone else, forget to be fierce about your child. The two things are not in conflict. You can be patient and measured and generous and still make completely clear that some things are not negotiable, that your child's place at the table is not negotiable, that who they are and what they deserve is not up for discussion at any family dinner, however beautifully laid the table is. Lily asked me a few weeks after the wedding if she could call James dad. I said that was entirely up to her and there was no rush. She thought about it for about 3 seconds. Then she said yes. I will take that over a wedding gift from Sandra any day of the week. Subscribe to After the Funeral. New stories every week. Stories that families never speak about out loud. The truth always comes out. There is something I left out of this story because it took me the longest to process, and I think it deserves its own moment at the end. About 6 weeks after the wedding, I was going through some old messages on my phone. The administrative kind of clearing out that you do when your camera roll is full and you need space. And I found a message thread between me and James from about 8 months before the dinner. A conversation we had had about Christmas plans that year, about whether we would spend it with Sandra or just the three of us. And in that thread, buried in a long back and forth about logistics and timing, was a message from James that I had read at the time and absorbed and filed away, and then apparently forgotten. He had written, "Mum asked again today whether Lily would be coming to Christmas. I told her yes. She said she supposed that was fine. She supposed that was fine." 8 months before the dinner, 8 months before Sandra looked at my daughter across a beautifully laid table and told her the evening was not for her, Sandra had already, in private, in a conversation with her son, described Lily's presence at a family occasion as something she supposed she could tolerate. I read that message 6 weeks after our wedding, and I sat with it for a long time. Not because it changed anything, not because it told me something I didn't already know about Sandra, but because it told me something about how long it had been building, and how much James had been aware of and been managing, and how the dinner had not been a spontaneous moment of cruelty, but the surface expression of something that had been running underground for much longer. I showed the message to James. He read it and he went quiet for a long time, and then he said, "I should have said something then, when she said it." I said, "Yes." I said, "I told myself it would get better once she knew Lily better, once there was more time." I said, "I know, that's what we tell ourselves." He said, "I'm sorry." I said, I know you are. And I believe you mean it. And I need you to understand that the reason this story ends where it does, with us married and Lily calling you Dad and Sandra at Sunday lunch in February asking about school, is not because I forgave my way to it. It's because you chose differently. When it counted, you chose. He said, I should have chosen sooner. I said, yes, but you chose. That is the part of this story I think matters most. Not Sandra's behavior at the dinner. That was painful and wrong and will live in my memory for a very long time in the particular file where I store the things that happened to my daughter that I could not fully prevent. But that part of the story was about Sandra. The part that was about James was what he did after. And what he did after was choose. He chose Lily. He chose me. He chose the family we were building over the version of family he had always known, which is one of the harder things a person can do because the family you have always known is woven into everything, is the first language you learned, is the context inside which you developed your entire understanding of what love looks like and what belonging feels like. Rewriting it, even partially, even gradually, requires a grief that I think people underestimate. A grief for the mother and son relationship that worked by not looking at certain things that is now required to look at them. James is grieving that still. I think he will be for a while. I try to hold space for it the way he holds space for things in me. That is what we do. That is the whole of it, really. Two people holding space for each other's griefs and choosing every day to stay in the room. Lily called him Dad for the first time on an ordinary Tuesday, not a special occasion. She was doing homework at the kitchen table and she needed help with something, and she looked up and said, Dad, can you? And then stopped and looked at him. And he looked at her, and neither of them said anything for a moment. Then he sat down next to her and looked at the homework and said, Right, let's see what we've got. And that was that. Some things don't need a ceremony. Some things just become true quietly in kitchens, on ordinary Tuesdays, when nobody is wearing their best dress. Those are the ones that last.